1, 2, 3.
It's time to talk fantasy football. Get your squad ready for this week's action with Frank and the Purple Rain crew. Now, live from the Fantasy Wire studios and home of the Casual Conversation podcast, it's the Purple Rain Fantasy Show.
Zimmerman, how's it going, man?
Oh, real good. How are you, Frank?
Excellent. The OG is going to join us today. We're going to talk some fantasy football. We had talked earlier. We had a great podcast about the history of fantasy football. I really enjoyed that. Get down, and if you haven't heard it or listened to that, go on the site and download that. Give it a listen. It's some good fantasy football history. I had a great time talking that with you last time.
Oh, I had a great time, and I'm really excited to be back today.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming on. Today, we're going to get into some starts and sits. We'll do we'll see who we landed in the waiver wire this week. We'll talk about some players that we can get rid of. I always like the show me Sunday short list. And we'll do some live NFL picks for the week here. Week 5's looking like a pretty good slate of games. What do you think?
Oh, I agree. I was looking over the slate, and other than my own Philadelphia Eagles, I'm pretty top heavy in visiting teams and away teams in terms of covering with my picks.
Yep. All right, well, let's get into some news because we had some NFL injury news and updates here today. I guess the most recent, we had John Ross for the Bengals wide receiver on injured reserve now. Case Keenum was in a walking boot. Steven Gostkowski, kicker on the Pats, is done. Quite a busy day. And then some guys that we probably won't be seeing for a while. Mitch Trubisky, we knew about him with the shoulder. We had Jamal Williams on that Thursday night game with the neck and the concussion, pretty big hit. Devontae Adams with the turf toe, and my God, I hope that is not the season ender turf toe deal. Those are terrible. Those are the sneaky ones. They don't seem like much, I guess, but I mean, Mitch, how many guys have you seen drop with turf toe and miss games and linger, you know?
Too many.
Yeah, some good ones too.
Oh, absolutely, over the years. And I'm sighing because I am the proud owner of Devontae Adams in one league.
Yeah, he's one guy I was not able to get in any leagues this year. He got snatched up really quick. And then Marlon Mack, running back on the Colts. I know he's got the ankle. Should be okay, but it's kind of like a questionable tag, limited practice. Christian Kirk, ankle. He supposedly looks good. He may skip practice but play in the game. The concussion protocol, Jarvis Landry for the Browns. TJ Hawkinson on the Lions. The protocol is always, you never know on those. It could be quick. It could be 3 days, whatever. Josh Allen, quarterback of the Bills. Mike Evans, he had a hand. I don't think that's anything major. Other than that, those are your pretty much big name headline guys for injuries for week 5. Anybody concern you on that list or not really?
Well, I had Josh Allen as a backup in a league, and I said sayonara to him anyway. I know that there aren't too many fantasy owners that are crying about that one.
No,
he's a bench stash. For me, he's on that list of players that, for me, they have to show me a little more before I totally trust them as an every week starter. So no, obviously, I do have Marlon Mack in a league, and it's a league where I lost Saquon Barkley. So I was a little thin of running backs in that league, and in my rapid fire segment, I'm actually going to be asking you a Marlon Mack question. So
nice.
Just to tip my hat.
Let's get into some. Yeah, I'll say don't play your hand too, just yet here. We got some little ways to go, but let's look at some fantasy starts this week. See who you like on the horizon for week 5. Give me some guys that you're going to be running out there with some good matchups. Obviously, we know we start our locks and our big name guys, but just anybody else maybe people aren't talking about or have some good potential this week.
There are 3 guys I have on my list for bounce back games, and I think you're going to get strong performances out of all 3 of them. One is Zach Prescott.
Yes.
He's home versus Green Bay. It's going to be an interesting game. I know the Packers had a little bit of a long respite there after playing Thursday night last week, but I think Prescott is really ready for a bounce back, and I think the Packers are primed to give him that. Deshaun Watson. Everybody who drafted Deshaun Watson real early is keeping their fingers crossed that he can do something versus Atlanta. And I definitely have him as a start because I believe in him this week. My boy Tom Brady. He only threw for about 150 yards last week. That was Buffalo. That was sort of a game script that was handed to him by the defense and the special teams. So he didn't have to do a whole lot. But Washington is definitely a team that you can throw all over the field to slot receivers, tight ends, although Brady doesn't have a lot to choose from right now in the tight end department. But I also think that this may be breakouts for some of his receivers too. And then finally, Jameis Winston. Welcome back, Jameis Winston. People have probably either haven't been starting him or he may not have been on some rosters. He was on waiver wires this week, and I'm putting him on my start list too. So there you go.
Yeah, that Rams game was who saw that coming, right?
Exactly, because the Rams is supposed to have a very strong defense, but I'm telling you that he jumped out. And he's kind of peeled off of some waiver wires, and he's going right onto some starting lineups. And I recommend him highly if you have him over, say, a Matt Ryan, some of these other guys. I would even consider him over Rodgers this week.
Yeah, I could say that too. I couldn't believe for week 4 going to LA. I talked about it on the SSVT show on Thursday with Dennis that I didn't really like Winston that week because especially with a chess match between Bruce Arians and Wade Phillips, right, on defense, you figured, they could get Winston and bait him into some mistakes. They can play his tendencies and, maybe it's a dud game for him. And then he turns around and does a performance like that. I couldn't believe it. I mean, that's just and I've been hashtagging it all over because fantasy, just because, it goes the other, when all things point you one way and it goes the opposite way, it's a because fantasy. What are you going to do? It's just one of the opposite kind of things that happen. It's just crazy.
Exactly. And Winston really personifies that. So my starts, Prescott, I mean, other than some studs, I mean, you're going to roll Mahomes out there every week, for an example. But Prescott, Winston, Brady, Watson.
Yeah, I like that lineup. I had for me, I was rolling with Marquez Valdez-Scantling this week without Devontae Adams in week 5. I think he's going to be, the receiver in Green Bay. They're going to move Geronimo Allison around 2. I think he could be like a low-end flex guy. But, I mean, somebody's catching those targets from Devontae Adams. I think MVS is your guy. Ronald Jones versus the Saints. He's had 16 second-half touches. No other Bucs running back had more than one. I think it's finally happening that he's your guy in Tampa Bay. Cooper Kupp, obviously, he had a nice week here. He's had like 46 targets through week 5 or something, second most in the league. He's got 9 targets in every game. I mean, that's a nice consistent PPR number in fantasy, so I'd roll him out. And then you had talked about Tom Brady and the Patriots this week at Washington and the receivers. And I'm totally on board with you there with Josh Gordon. I think it's going to be split a little, like I know you had said earlier with Gordon and Edelman, but I think Gordon would be the most to gain out of that matchup. I think Washington, they've 31 fantasy points a game to receiver, something crazy, second most in the league. They're nuts. I think Gordon, he'd be my favorite personal receiver out of that bunch for New England. And we're talking about comeback games or whatever. Austin Hooper going against the Texans. He looked good too last week, but I think he gets kind of a bump up, even though it's a kind of a tough matchup. Austin Hooper is trailing only Darren Waller in tight end receptions. It's tough to leave him, out of the upper tier, in my opinion. So I like him again this week for sure.
Absolutely, and I agree with everything you said there. From some of the other positions other than quarterback that I had on my list, I definitely had both Edelman and Gordon for New England on my list because Washington has just been a sieve. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now here's one I have for you. Watch out for him. I think he's going to have his breakout, and he's going to do it under the bright lights of Monday Night Football. Deebo Samuel.
I would like to see that.
I would, if you have, say, Galladay on bye, if you have some bye week, or even if Marvin Jones is on your roster, and you also maybe had Adams and you're kind of strapped, and Devo has been sitting on your bench for a while, especially last week when San Fran was on a bye. I would roll him out, and I have already plugged him into the two lineups that I have him as on my bench, especially in one case where I have Galladay. So I'm endorsing Deebo Samuel Monday night.
I like that pick. I'd like to see him. I grabbed him in one. He's just kind of been sitting around for me. A couple other leagues I missed out and didn't get him, but that's a good pick. I like that one. Let's get into some sits. Some fantasy sits this week. Who are you kind of benching here?
I think I'm going to park Mason Rudolph on the Pines this week versus the Ravens. I think the Ravens are going to be loaded for bear, and I don't think it's going to be a good outing for Mason Rudolph. I would sit him. And if you want to call me Captain Obvious on these two, Kirk Cousins and Andy Dalton.
Yeah.
So those are a couple of quarterbacks I would sit. I think I would sit Sony Michel. I have Sony Michel. I took him out of every lineup where I have him. As much as I like the New England receivers, this may be a sneaky week for James White, and you may even get some goal line touches for some of the other running backs they have there if the wide receivers don't make it to the house. I don't think that Sony Michel is going to give you what you wanted when you drafted him, so I would be sitting him too. I had John Ross on this list, but now that he's injured, and till further notice, sayonara to Jared Cook and Kyle Rudolph on the tight end side of things.
Yes, I would agree with you there. Absolutely. I've got Marcus Mariota against the Bills. We talk about the Buffalo defense too. I'm a believer. I think they're for real. They're looking really good. They're playing good defensive ball. Mariota's been good, averaging 7.8 yards per attempt or something. I mean, he's pretty decent, or he's among top 12 this year. But just that defense for the Bills, I'm a believer. If you're not a believer, this could be the week that makes you one. Josh Jacobs against the Bears. The autumn wind enters London. He's looked every bit to me like a first round talent. I think he's looked really good. It's a good fit for him there. But I think, on the road in London, the Bears, Khalil Mack, I mean, he's going to have some juice in that game to play his old team. The Bears have only allowed 11.5 fantasy points per game. Their damage, I mean, through the air for the Raiders, it's when Jacobs isn't really used. So I don't think he could offer much this week. DJ Shark has been a pretty hot guy. I grabbed him in some leagues and have been playing him with some success. And this week against the Panthers are allowing 5.2 yards per pass attempt. They've faced some pretty decent receivers so far this season, and they've held him in check. So I don't think Shark would do as well as he has been in an outing against Carolina. Other than that, Chris Thompson going back to that Skins and Patriots game, if it's a complete blowout, even at quarterback, we don't even know who the quarterback is for Washington this week. Jay Gruden has said, there was no plan or something. I think the quote was, we don't have a plan.
Frank, do you care? Do you care? Do you care?
No,
I mean, maybe if you're rolling out, you're rolling out one of the Washington receivers. I mean, a lot of guys like Terry. What? Oh my God, I'm blanking on his name.
McLaurin.
Terry McLaurin. I even have him on one of my benches. He was a throw-in in a week 1 trade I made, and I got Terry McLaurin, and he's done very well. But I mean, maybe if you're a Terry McLaurin owner and you have to use him, you're probably keeping an eye on the quarterback situation with Washington. But my goodness, I mean, who cares?
Yeah. So those would be mine. I mean, Thompson in there, but that would be my take for the sits this week.
Yeah. I also had Josh Jacobs on this list because the Bears will be loaded for Bears. And in that league we talked about on the podcast in August, my league that's been around since 1988, that I'm the commissioner of, that's an IDP league. And folks, check that out on the archives if Purple Rain Show if you haven't heard it. We had a lot of fun talking about that league. It's an IDP league, individual defensive players, and yes, I have Khalil Mack, and Khalil Mack, I am licking my chops at his potential for this coming weekend. So keep an eye on the Bears defense against Oakland in London, and other than that, your list sounds pretty stout.
Definitely. Yeah, I'm looking forward to the London game, and I'm glad that they finally got the time dialed in. I think it's like a 6 or 7 hour difference, so we can stay on schedule with the afternoon game, and they get the prime time aspect of it. So that finally, I'm not waking up at 8 o'clock to dial up my Amazon or Yahoo to watch a game, for God's sake. But this one's going to be good.
And I think it's going to be on regular. I think Fox has it. So I'm just looking at this right now. Bears, Raiders, Fox. Yeah, I have that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
Excellent.
And
let's jump into.
It says Bears at Raiders. Whatever. If the Bears are designated as the visiting team, they really lucked out on that one, where they're in a neutral site against Oakland of all people, where they're using one of their away games there. So they also lucked out on that. So.
What do you think for London? Who shows out for London? Because London's always interesting as far as the fans come out and they support their team. So in the audience and the stands, I mean, you've got jerseys of all 32 teams represented. But you think it's going to be a pro Raider crowd? You think it's going to be a Bears crowd? I kind of feel like the Bears are going to edge out Raider Nation this week. I don't know. It's really a tough call, but for some reason, the old school Bears, I think. It seems like a lot of old school teams really dominate fandom in the UK. So I kind of think the Bears might get it. I don't know.
I agree with that because people overseas are really still, after all these years, dialed into the Mike Ditka Chicago Bears.
Yeah.
Like the legend and lore of the '85 Bears still permeate the hearts of a lot of people, both here and abroad. So you'll probably be seeing that, that midnight blue and orange a lot in that stadium. Now, Raiders fans kind of travel well, but I think it would be, taking the other uniforms out of the mix for a minute that you'll see in London. I think it's going to be like probably 60-40 Chicago Bears in terms of those two teams.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Well, let's do some rapid fire right here. Let's do some 5 rapid fire questions. If you want to go first and run them by me, or you want me to run yours, what do you? It's up to you. We're
gonna alternate. How's that?
Okay.
We'll alternate. So I already tipped my hand about a Marlon Mack question. So Here's my rapid fire number one. You're a Marlon Mack owner. He's questionable. So far, they haven't really given us any stout information. A, what do you do if you're a Marlon Mack owner and he does play? But B, what do you do if you're a Marlon Mack owner if he doesn't play?
Yeah, I've been going back and forth on Twitter with a lot of people on this too, and it's really tough because it's hard to gauge these injuries and the extent. So I think if I'm a Mac owner, I'm not dumping him. I may not start him this week. I'm going to watch the updates right up until kickoff and just see, are they starting him? Is he sitting? Is it game time decision? Whatever the case is. But man, if he doesn't play, you got to really give a look at Wilkins behind him or Hines and almost flip a coin between those two, because I haven't really, I mean, we saw them last year, but every year is different. Who's going to be the hot hand? I would assume it's then again, Wilkins flashes. So, I mean, if I'm looking on fantasy waiver wires and stuff, maybe I'd one of those in just to be safe and cover my ass, I guess. I mean, that's kind of, you got to wait it out almost with
exactly.
this kind of stuff.
Exactly. Now, the one league that I mentioned earlier that I have Marlon Mack, unfortunately, right now I only really have one decent running back, and that's from the Ravens. I have Mark Ingram because I lost Barkley. But it's a half-point PPR league, and boy, do I hate half-point PPR leagues, but it's a half-point PPR league. If it was full-point PPR, I would probably be keeping my eye on Naheem Hines, but I just threw this in there as my first rapid fire because I don't know what I'm going to do.
There you go. It's a good question. It's a very relevant question, and it's honestly one I've been on Twitter with the past couple days here. So that was a good one. I'm gonna throw one back to you. My first for you personally, if you can remember off the top of your head, I know you've been doing it a long time. What's your all-time best fantasy winning championship team? I mean, you don't have to give me the whole damn roster, but I mean, give me some names that you remember on that team that was like, that was probably the best season of fantasy football I've ever played.
Oh, that's it. That's easy. No, that's easy because I've told you yesterday and I told you today that before I was ready to rock, I was out walking my dogs. I have two Boston Terriers and they're brothers. Back in the day, we had three other Boston Terriers. Now we have these two. They're 6 years old and 5 years old. My 6-year-old, his name is Brady. His name is Brady. And now you can probably guess why I named him Brady. Because I won a lot of money in my Dynasty League, that same league since 1988. I won a lot of money with Tom Brady through the early to mid 00s, all the way through about 2008, with combinations of Tom Brady, LaDainian Tomlinson, Larry Johnson, and Marvin Harrison, all on the same team.
Oh, Harrison was like the most consistent guy, wasn't he?
I mean, if you needed a plug and play wide receiver that you didn't have to worry about, you just had him in there. I never had Peyton Manning, but it didn't matter. I had Marvin Harrison.
Right.
LaDainian Tomlinson might be one of the all-time fantasy football running backs in terms of amassing fantasy points. Larry Johnson for the Kansas City Chiefs and Penn State was not very shabby at all. And then you put Tom Brady on that team. When he was throwing his, 48, 100, 5,000 yard years, 40, 50 touchdowns, whatever he was getting. They were winning some Super Bowls. In two particular years of that stretch, we had 14 teams. So the prize pool was pretty stout. So thank you for asking me that. Those were the glory years for me in fantasy football. When in that Dynasty League, I had Brady, LJ, LT, and Marvin Harrison. And I had some other very viable fantasy options too. Very strong back then.
Yeah, I love thinking about those old time players and then just going back to the fantasy lineups, and it was like, oh, I remember when I had like Tony Gonzalez, man, he was awesome. And, if you scoop some of them guys before they got, on the map. But yeah, LT was, man, he was money. You're right. He was probably the best on fantasy. If you could land him on your roster, good God. I mean, you had a win over your opponent's running back pretty much any week. I mean, he never really had a dud game. He had some down ones, but oh my God, the combination of catches and rushes and just the guy's always on fire.
No, he was great. I had him all the way till when he was on the Jets too. I mean, I had him wire to wire, and I had Tom Brady until we disbanded the dynasty portion of that particular league, because some of the owners changed over and we went to Yahoo, and we went away from pencil and paper and USA Today. But I had Brady since he was a rookie. I drafted LaDainian Tomlinson with the second pick of a draft the year he came out. I got Marvin Harrison in a trade with an owner that's still in that league, and he will never trade again. After all these years later, he won't trade because he got burned in that trade. And it's not like he got skank in return. He gave me Marvin Harrison in what was a pretty fair deal. I parted with Tiki Barber in that deal. And I don't remember the rest of it, but it was a pretty fair deal with me having those two running backs. And I think I might have had the bust that year too. I was able to part with Tiki Barber to get Marvin Harrison to put on my wide receiver list there. And it was off to the races in years like 2004, 2006, 2007. It was just, lay it on me. That was just money, and it was gold, and I loved it. You wanted to, and for you, those are old time players. I go all the way back, as we mentioned several times, to 1988.
Oh yeah, I mean, for all you dynasty players out there, just think of that. You're firing up a dynasty squad in fantasy, and there's an up and coming Tom Brady at quarterback. Don't know much about him, filling in for Drew Bledsoe. He might be all right. I'll throw him on the roster on a taxi squad or whatever, and let him sit and see what happens. Oh my God, that's crazy.
Well, I had him. I had him because I had Bledsoe.
It's just
a couple of years
funny.
Before I drafted Bledsoe in the first round, or earlier, whenever it was. I was the Bledsoe owner. I even had a Bledsoe jersey. I stopped wearing jerseys back then because every time I had a jersey, either the player got traded, he got hurt, something. I had a Jeff Blake Cincinnati Bengals jersey. I had a Bledsoe jersey. What Eagle did I have? I think I had a Mike Golick Sr. jersey, and then he goes ahead and retires like 2 years later or a year later.
Oh my God.
I actually still have that one. I think my son has it now. It's the throwback, the Kelly Green Mike Golick's number 90 jersey.
Wow.
Yeah. So, all right. Now
I like collecting them now.
Yeah. Well, who knew? I could have had a whole collection of jerseys from players. It just who's that other guy from Notre Dame, the quarterback from Notre Dame that played for the Seahawks, and then I think later he played for Dallas. He wore number 3. I'm not even remembering his name right now, but I had his jersey too. Nice. Anyway, rapid fire number 2, and I kind of teased this a little earlier also. And it is, do you trust any New England running back in week number 5?
Yeah, personally, I just don't yet. I don't even own, to be honest, any Patriots backs at all in any my and I don't know what to think of them, to trust them or not this week. Ever since Devlin went out at fullback, it seems like Sony's having a tougher time hitting holes and getting the run game going. I mean, he's flash, but I mean, I just don't know if I had him. If I was an owner, I'd be on the fence about either trading him or just sticking with him, depending on what my running back depth looks like on the team. That's how I would approach it.
Yeah, I'd probably agree. I have him in a couple of leagues, but he's my in the leagues I have him, he's either my RB3 or 4. 10. I'm in a couple of 10-team leagues, home leagues with family and friends, and so he dropped pretty far down there. And when he's sitting there, where I can pick him like in the 5th round, I certainly wasn't going to pass up that opportunity to have Sony Michel in the 5th round. But I try to float him out.
Yeah,
there
I wouldn't have passed him up. Yeah, I wouldn't have passed him up in the draft. He really never fell to me. I never got to a point in a draft to say, should I take Sony right now or should I grab someone else? I never really got to that, so it kind of worked out. But I mean, yeah, the Redskins this week, I think he's a good play. You know, he's got good potential against a bad team.
Yeah. All right. So what do you got for me next?
Number 2, I'm going to go. We talked a little about it just now, but your favorite teams growing up.
Growing up, it was both the Jets and the Giants. Because they were in different leagues, the AFL and the NFL, I didn't have any problem being a fan of both of them. I'm a native of Brooklyn, New York. Right. We did have season tickets. My dad and his business partners were able to procure New York Giants seasons tickets for a few years. But then my father and I, we were kind of kindred souls on this one. Once November and December started rolling around, it became a little bit of a pain in the ass to go to the stadium and freeze our butts off. Yeah, I mean, it's really cool in September and October, nice, beautiful fall football weather. But you know what? We kind of enjoyed watching, you'd see the Giants at 1 o'clock on CBS and the Jets on NBC in the 4 o'clock game, or vice versa. Or maybe one of them was in Monday Night Football. And we and my father just let his partners have the season tickets, and we agreed. And plus, I was in college, so I wasn't even going that much. But it was the Jets and the Giants. I was already I was a freshman in college when the New York Jets won that Super Bowl, just as the leagues were merging. The Joe Namath Super Bowl of 1969. Yep. So that was kind of fun. The Giants were going through some pretty lean times in that stretch when I was in high school and college. When I was younger, they had some pretty good teams. You would know some of these names. Pat Summerall, Frank Gifford, Y.A. Tittle, Sam Huff, the original Fearsome Foursome with Rosie Greer before he went and played for the L.A. Rams. Those were the ones when I was younger, and those were the New York Giants teams of my childhood. So I was a Giants and a Jets fan.
Cool. Good stuff.
So, all right.
Hit me on your next.
I was looking at that Cincinnati-Arizona game, okay? We all watched Cincinnati go to pieces the other night against Pittsburgh. So what you have here is a very struggling offense in Cincinnati and an extremely leaky defense in Arizona. So what do you do with that game? I mean, yeah, you're gonna start DJ on the Arizona side, and you probably would be rolling Larry Fitzgerald out there if you have him. But what do you just do with that game if you have any players from either roster?
Well, somebody's got to win, right? 0-3-1 Cards and the 0-4 Bengals.
Right.
Somebody better walk off the field with a win. If there is a tie, I swear to God, I don't know. Yeah, for offensive purposes, right? Who's got more firepower out of those two teams? It's got to be the Cardinals. I mean, they're throwing the ball like no tomorrow. So, I mean, Murray owners, Fitzgerald has been a really nice slot option this year. I think he was they ranked him at top 10 or something. I saw a stat earlier today with it as far as receptions and targets. So I like Fitzgerald, Murray. Christian Kirk, we'll have to see game time if he plays. I think he could do some damage. But then the Bengals, you just lost John Ross with the injured reserve tag. So Auden Tate I guess, is the next man up. If you have him, maybe throw him in a flex, or if you're in a deep league, he's your guy. Andy Dalton, streamer quarterback. I mean, it could be a shootout style game. Joe Mixon, is it going to be a ground and pound Bengal attack? Teams are getting through the Cardinals D line, so maybe Joe Mixon at a flex or a RB2 kind of thing. If you got 3 running backs and RB3, I don't know. Those would be really the only plays for me.
Yeah, well, see,
Eifert. Yeah, I guess Eifert. I can't really
Eifert.
forget about Eifert.
Eifert is the one guy I have my eye on in the Cincinnati offense, because what's his name? Michael Jordan. What number 60? I think he's a center or a guard for Cincinnati. Oh my goodness, he was a human turnstile against Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
I'm afraid for Dalton and Joe Mixon's life. I don't know if they have a fullback on the roster, but they got to do something. I could see some 2 tight end sets with Zimmer and Eifert. I just don't know what to make of it. I mean, if Arizona has anybody capable of getting to the quarterback, this might be the time for them to get off track a little bit. But that's going to be an interesting or a boring game, depending on how you really feel about these two teams.
Yeah, I think if you're an Eifert owner, you've got to make a decision. Go with your gut, but you got to ask: are the Bengals going to keep him to block, and protect Dalton, or are they going to use him just to move chains, get him out in the quick passes, quick outs to keep the ball moving and a quick style attack without having John Ross now, and your weapons are depleted on the outside? So that's hard to say for me. I kind of feel like they're going to want to keep him in, like you said, with 2 tight end sets and protect Dalton and Mixon at all costs. But then again, I mean, the way the Cards put up points, they're going to probably have to play from behind maybe at some point. It's hard to say. And then where do you go, right? You got to pass it. You got to throw the ball down the field. You can't dink and dunk. So that's a tough call for me. I think Eifert, if he's in there, he's got a good ceiling. But floor is way low if he doesn't do much and they keep him on the line.
Right. But the trend is your friend. And the trend against the Arizona defense for tight ends, until I see differently, I'm going to keep my eye on whomever is playing Arizona and keep a watch on the tight end situation. I mean, last week it was the coming out party for Seattle's Will Dissly. So who knows? Mm-hmm. But that's why I threw that out there. I was really interested in your take and your opinion on that. So yeah, all right, thanks.
Well, I'll give you one here for a rapid fire. This is kind of like a Twitter question I had too. So a guy asked me here, having a hard time with this one, limited ads on his, waivers and whatnot, but not sure if he should start Phillip Rivers against Denver, little division rivalry game, or Jacoby Brissett off of waivers. It's at EMPERIALT, Imperial T. Mm-hmm. I've been thinking about that question all day today, because the division rivalry, how Rivers stacks up against Denver head to head, but then you've got Brissett. So my question to you would be, you're in that spot for this guy. What would you do if it was your team?
Rivers. I'm not even thinking about it. I like Rivers in this situation. I'm not a Rivers owner. I think that it's going to be Keenan Allen all day long. I think that they're going to throw a lot of stuff at the Broncos defense in LA. They're getting Melvin Gordon back. They are going to mix and match Gordon and Eckler. Eckler is very dangerous coming out of the backfield. I'm sure that people remember that Gordon has tremendous upside coming out of the backfield, catching passes as well. They don't really have a viable tight end because Hunter Henry is injured again. But I could see them opening it up. Mm-hmm. And Rivers can play pitch and catch in a situation like this. I think the the Chargers are going to be ahead, or what I should say is the Broncos are going to be playing from behind most of this game. I don't even consider this a coin toss for me. Brissett is a nice play. Chiefs do have some difficulties against the pass sometimes. The Colts will probably be playing from behind, but the Chiefs may also be dominating time of possession in this game, you see. So that may be a hindrance to Jacoby Brissett. I like his talent. I like his upside. But if it's between these two guys, I'm plugging Rivers in and sleeping like a baby.
Yeah, I'm leaning Rivers too. And just going back to like the game splits or the rivalry series, last year, Denver, what week was it here? I'm just looking here. This is live, so bear with me. Yeah, week 11 in Denver, he put up 29 fantasy points. And then he closed out the season last year at Denver with 12. So you're like, home and away split. Okay. And then you go to 17. They start out week 1 at Denver. He puts up 26 points. And then week 7, 21. So I think he's got a good average against him. He's really only had the one kind of dud game. So, I mean, yeah, I guess I'd lean Rivers as well. And then Brissett, you kind of drool a little bit at the ceiling and the potential, but going back to the Twitter question too, he's got limited waivers, limited ads for waivers. So do you want to burn one up on Brissett, or do you want to kind of, depending where you're at in that league, I guess, you probably want to hold tight, right?
So he doesn't have both of them. Rivers is his quarterback, and he wanted to know if he should pick up Brissett in waivers.
Yeah.
No, don't
for a play, for a weekly play.
No, I would not do that.
You got to stick with Rivers on that.
Absolutely. Now, my next rapid fire question for you is actually, I think we answered this a little earlier. This is one I put down after you sent me the prep sheet here, because I actually have this conundrum. But I think we kind of put this one to bed. So since it's rapid fire, I think you can answer this one pretty quickly. Daniel Jones or Jameis Winston on week 5?
Yeah, it's Winston, like we just said. Ride the trend, ride the hot hand, and roll it out again. Yeah, that would be my pick there.
Yeah, no, I was probably thinking of plugging in a different question for this one, but we kind of touched on it here, and I wanted to throw it out there. So yes, I agree. I think everybody listening to this podcast, if you still have Winston on your waiver wire for whatever reason, I know a lot of leagues still have Thursday waivers. When this drops, your waivers may be over already. But if Winston is still sitting there, you can't let him loose if you have waiver options. He's somebody that's on the uptick here.
Oh yeah. And then for me, my next one for you would be, since week 4 was kind of the beginning of some good rivalry games, and then week 5's got my favorite rivalry, of course, Ravens and Steelers. We got a good one with Broncos Chargers coming up. For you personally, what's your favorite rivalry series? Maybe current or old, whatever your favorite one is that you really enjoyed or currently enjoy.
It's the Eagles and the Cowboys. Now it's funny how the Cowboys don't necessarily consider the Eagles to be their rivals. I think maybe they consider either the Steelers or from the old days, or the Redskins to be their rivals. But here, it's all about the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, you'll see midnight green Eagles T-shirts around that say Dallas sucks on them. It's just way back, starting from way back. One of the very first sports talk radio stations was our own WIP here in Philadelphia. And they would have rallies out in the big square in town here. It's called Rittenhouse Square. they would have rallies on the weekend that they'd be playing the Dallas Cowboys. And then in their pregame show that they do from outside the stadium, everybody would just be gathered around the tent where they're doing the live radio show, yelling, "Dallas sucks, Dallas sucks." It just goes way back to even before I moved here from Philadelphia to Philadelphia and entrenched myself as an Eagles fan. It's been going on here for a long time, and I don't think it's going to end anytime soon. If you stop most Philadelphians on the street that are Eagles fans and say, "What team do you hate the most?" I would say maybe 2% would say the New York Giants, maybe 4% would say the Pittsburgh Steelers.
They were chanting Cowboys sucks. Yeah.
No,
they were chanting Dallas sucks at Lambeau here on Thursday night.
Well, I'll tell you what.
I don't know if it came through on the TV or not, but you could hear it.
That's because the Packer fans learned from the Philadelphia fans. I'm telling you, they sell T-shirts outside. Those not. I'm sure they have them in every NFL city. Those guys that sell like the $10 T-shirts outside the stadium that aren't licensed shirts. But especially on the Dallas, the day of the Dallas game, which is usually once a year, you see these guys in all four corners of the stadium selling Dallas Sucks T-shirts. It's been the biggest rivalry here in pro football for as long as I've been living in the Philadelphia area. I would say the biggest sports rivalry of all time probably is the New York Yankees Boston Red Sox, which is another story for another day. But this is a pretty passionate rivalry here, Frank.
Definitely.
All right. Well, this is rapid fire number 5. There have been 3 very sexy young replacement quarterbacks that people are talking about. What is your opinion of these 3, and how would you rank them? Mason Rudolph, Kyle Allen, Gardner Minshew.
Oh, see, I thought for sure you were throwing me a Daniel Jones in there too, but I like that. So I would go Minshew. Oh shit. I don't know. Yeah. I like Minshew at 1 because he's got the defense to keep him in games, and he holds onto the ball. He's not making mistakes. He looks the part when you watch him. I think he's going to make some mistakes, and you can see a little rawness, I guess, on out there playing. But I like him. He's got some decent receivers. He's got a defense to back him up. Number 2 would be Mason Rudolph. He's got the Steelers, the organization. He's got support. He's got solid coaching in place, consistency. I think he can come up and develop and get better. And I know, Antonio Brown's gone. There's no more Le'Veon Bell, but he still has Connor. He's got Washington, who I'm hoping comes around. I really like him. He's a former college teammate. Deontay Johnson is a hot receiver coming up right now. He's been getting a lot of looks. So I think he's set up. He's still got a good defense behind him as well. And I'm going to go Kyle Allen last, only because, look at this guy's past couple games. He cannot protect the football. He's turning it over. He's throwing interceptions. He's fumbling. Unless he can improve upon that, I'm going to keep him down at the 3 spot. But they all have good defenses, which is the most beneficial thing to a young quarterback, is to, have a good defense to back you up, keep you rested, and you don't have to go out there and win every damn game on your arm for the most part. But I rank them in that order off the top.
Yeah, I kept Danny Dimes and Teddy Bridgewater off that list because I know you would have put Danny Dimes number 1 and Teddy Bridgewater number 5. But the 3 that the 3 that everybody has been talking about now. Kyle Allen is undefeated right now. just so you know. But he has been having
I
fumble.
know.
Yeah, he's been having turnover issues. They don't have anywhere else to go, though. I mean, really, it's not one of those deals where the coaching staff is going to have to,
They got to
bench him.
go up.
They got to go with him at this point. I think Minshew is, to me, is he the real deal yet? Not sure. I don't know if he's just a cult hero because of his goofy demeanor and his outlandish clothing. It's made him like a cult hero of some nature.
I know.
I think Mason, of the three, I think Mason Rudolph is the most polished of the three and has the best tools to actually succeed in terms of what he can do. I think he's got the best pedigree. I liked him in college, Oklahoma State, right? That's where he went. He showed me a lot in college. He stepped right in Pittsburgh, and I think the players believe in him. So I know that Minshew and Allen, his teammates have been rallying behind them as well. But in my opinion, I would go Rudolph, Allen, and Minshew third. That's for me. But I hear you put out some pretty sound reasoning there for Minshew to be the first one. He's actually taking good control of that team.
He's got factor,
Yep. No, we'll see. But I saved that one for last because it's a really interesting conundrum in terms of when these guys started to be out there as replacements. Everybody was talking about them. Are they going to be better than who they're replacing, and to what extent? That kind of thing. Minshew's got the easier path because he's replacing a guy that really doesn't have a pedigree in Jacksonville, although he's won a Super Bowl in Philadelphia. Nick Foles, he's not had the longevity and the pedigree in Jacksonville, whereas Kyle Allen and Mason Rudolph are replacing longtime leaders on their respective teams.
Yeah. I'll give you my last one here. I always do like a little curve on the fence, but I don't know if you're a car guy. I'm a big car guy, so I'm going to say you've won the lottery with first car purchase.
If I won the lottery, what would I go out and get? I would get.
You win the lottery. You got all your other stuff dialed in, right? You've already got the house. You've got everything else done. Now it's time to go buy a car. What's the car? What's the big spend on the car here?
Okay. For me, it's a Jaguar XJE to drive. A Jaguar XJE. Okay. And and I would also get a Rolls-Royce Silver Cloud, and my chauffeur would be driving my wife and I around in the Rolls-Royce Silver Cloud. So for me personally, to tool around.
No Wraith? You don't like that Wraith? Have you seen that?
I've seen all these cars, but you see, the Jaguar XJE is a sports car that has a history, and it's very recognizable as probably one of the top of the line.
It's just classy. Yeah.
That's right, and it's won a few Grand Prix back in the day. And I would actually, you know what I would do? I would get two of each of those. I'd try to buy a classic XJE, like a 1962 XJE, and I get a 2000 and I get a 2020 XJE, and I would probably get a brand new Rolls-Royce Silver Cloud, but I'd also want in my garage one of those old-time Rolls-Royce that you see like in a James Bond movie, or from like the original James Bond movies from back in the day. I don't think that's the car he had. I think he had a Bentley, but that ilk, like a 1956 Rolls-Royce Silver Cloud would probably.
There you go. Oh.
Yeah. So that, yeah. So you are talking to a guy who's
the
first car.
XJE is like the most. Go ahead. It was cutting out. Sorry.
No, I'm going to want to hear what you have to say about the XJE, but you're talking to a guy whose first car ever was a 1966 Pontiac GTO. So I am kind of a car guy.
Good deal. I love it. Yeah, the XJE, I mean, that's like the most modeled after car, copied body design, even from like the 60s. And it's just the classiest car, I think, out there. I mean, as far as everything, still has some modern looks, the body styling. They have a car show out here in Milwaukee. It's the concourse that's in Pebble Beach. They have them in all different states, but the one in Milwaukee here, they had one with a Jaguar feature. And man, they had all the XJEs out there. I got to send you some.
Oh man, that would be sweet.
Many of them, best of show. I mean, they're like $1 million cars. It was insane.
No, you see, you asked the right guy the right question there.
Perfect. We can jump back into some fantasy, and we'll do some risk reward players. Talk about some risk reward players this week for just boomer bust material type guys. And I got 3 that stand out the most to me, and these are some guys that we've been talking about on Twitter as well. We talked about that Colts backfield with Nyheim Hines against KC. I know I got him as a boomer bust because, like you said, the MAC is still up in the air. We don't know what's going on there just yet. But if he is out and you're going to roll with Hines, I think he's the better pass catching back out of that duo between Wilkins and stuff. He hauled in 6 on Sunday. Whereas again, he's going to be the beneficiary, but if they're not and it's a tight game, it's a boomer bust type play. And Jordan Howard, we watched him up here in Green Bay just decimate the Packers on the ground. The Packers have a real run defensive problem, but I don't know if I'm projecting him again this week to repeat, or is he going to stay consistent? Is he going to be the guy? All we heard was Miles Sanders, but I think if you play Howard this week, he's a boomer bust. It's hard to say what he's going to do. I mean, he had 3 touchdowns on Thursday night. It's his show back there, but man, I just don't know for this week. He could be a flex play, boomer bust. And then finally, Darren Waller. We talked about the Bears and the Raiders in London. You got to think Waller. I mean, he's getting like 30% of the targets there, right? He's getting all the options, but man, Khalil Mack is going to wreak havoc. I just don't know if they're going to lock him down, focus on him, take away the Raiders' best option, kind of like Belichick style. I think Waller could be a boomer bust, and being the main guy on that Raiders offense, yeah, he's got a great ceiling every week, and he's dominating targets and stuff on the team. So we'll see how that plays out there.
Great minds think alike, because I had Jordan Howard on my list as well.
Did you? Yeah, I mean, he's a hot topic right now after that performance.
And we talked about this guy earlier, Jameis Winston. Jameis Winston can duplicate what he did last week, or he could be the Jameis Winston that threw 4 or 5 interceptions in one game. What was it, last year or the year before? To me, Jameis Winston is the prototypical player that I've always thought of in terms of boomer bust, risk reward, high ceiling, low floor, any way you want to put it. To me, that's Jameis Winston, up and down. And another quarterback we talked about earlier also, Deshaun Watson, because I still don't trust his offensive line.
Yeah, me either.
I don't trust his offensive line, but if he starts clicking on all cylinders, you'll get the Deshaun Watson that a lot of people were drafting like in the 3rd and 4th round, as the second quarterback going off the board this summer after Pat Mahomes. So, those are a couple of guys I had on my list in addition to Jordan Howard that you mentioned earlier.
Nice. And then I know we're recording here on Wednesday. We always talk about some waiver watches. Did you score anybody this week off of waivers that was a good ad? Anybody that you managed to land that you had eyed up or?
Yeah, Golden Tate was sitting there on a bunch of almost all of my waiver wires. I guess guys forgot about him during his 4-week suspension, and Sterling Shepard's been doing a good job. But there was one of my teams where I was a little bit thin on wide receiver, and I elevated one of the guys off my bench. Actually, we talked about him as well, Devo Samuel. So I went out and grabbed Golden Tate, which is somebody I had on my waiver watch if we were going to do this yesterday. And because I'm also an owner of Devontae Adams in a league, Geronimo Allison was on the waiver wire in that league, and I was able to score Geronimo Allison. And then finally, another player we talked about a couple of times here, in the 2 leagues where I have TJ Hawkinson as my only tight end, I went out and I'm taking a stab at Tyler Eifert. And I was able to get him in both instances where I was a Hawkinson owner.
There you go. Yeah, the Geronimo Allison's a good ad. I know I dropped him week 1. He gave me a 0, and I said, I'm done, right? I might want him back, depending on this Devontae Adams turf toe deal. So that's a good pickup for you. Absolutely. Because he was coming up as a rookie out of Northern Illinois, and he was really getting a chemistry going with Aaron Rodgers. He flashed, then he got the core or the abdomen injury, and he missed, a ton of time. And he's been battling back since then to get his spot, in the offseason, is Geronimo Allison going to be the 2 or the 3? Is it MVS? And, MVS is the 6'3", 4'3" speed guy. They want him involved. I think it's still playing out with the new offense. So, but you never know which one of those guys. He could emerge at any time. Aaron Rodgers is going to throw it to the hot hand. So the waivers for me this week, I kind of screwed up, and I had Jalen Samuels in a bunch of leagues, right? I dropped him the other week.
Okay.
I figured it was done. I let him go, so now I can't get him back. But I did manage. I did manage to get Cole Beasley, good target in Buffalo.
Okay.
I did manage to get Deontay Johnson in a league for the Steelers. Thank God. I think he's going to be the up and comer there.
Yep.
Yeah, like I said, I missed out on Samuels, grabbing him back, and then I had to go deep for Mohamed Sanu in a league just because it's a 2 flex spot league, and I didn't really have that second kind of consistent flex guy. And if you look at Sanu, he's always been pretty steady as far as a floor. So I picked him up, and that's really it for me on the waivers this week.
All right. Well, we'll keep our eye on those guys. On my waiver watch list, I had Deontay Johnson on there, but believe it or not, he was being talked up quite a bit the week before. So he was not available in some of the leagues I'm in. So A.J. Brown, coming off a good week, is somebody that's on waivers. And if I didn't get Geronimo Allison in that particular one instance, the second guy I had on my request was A.J. Brown, but I guess I didn't need that. If you were in that league with me right now, you can get A.J. Brown if you wanted. He's still out there. So
nice.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll jump into the show short list, and these are the players on a short list or a cut list, you could say. We'll introduce them here.
Screw you! You're fired! You're fired! Whoa! You're fired! You're fired!
I had somebody ask me about throwing Donald Trump's old apprentice, "You fired," in there. But nobody beats Vince McMahon, in my opinion. They just don't.
Fired. Well, did I mention this?
He's got the best.
Did I mention to you that 2 of my kids work for World Wrestling Entertainment?
Yes. Yeah, we talked about that, Lucky Dogs.
Yeah. The other day, October 1st, marks my older son's 11th anniversary with WWE. And
That's awesome.
Yeah, and my daughter-in-law works in the same building with the McMahons and Triple H and some of the executives, whereas my son is a TV producer, so he works out of their broadcast center, which is about a quarter mile away from their main building.
Nice.
So yeah, Vince McMahon's "You're fired." I love
gotta
that.
have
I love
McMahon in
hearing
there.
that. Absolutely, I think you're right about that. Much better than the Donald Trump one. Absolutely.
Oh,
yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. So yeah, what do you got? I have a long. This is not a short list, so I want to hear who you have. I mean, I have a long list, so I want to hear who you have.
Well, for me, I had a pretty decent amount of guys, but I think Trey Burton, I'm done with him. Kyle Rudolph on the Vikings. I mean, with Kirk Cousins. Speaking of Kirk Cousins.
Yep.
I would have Marquise Lee on the Jags. What the hell is going on with him? I thought he was going to do something this year. I mean, I picked him up in some deep leagues, a dynasty league, just because I thought, we don't know in the offseason. We didn't know who was going to emerge out of that Jags wide receiver core. I thought Lee probably had a good chance, but he hasn't done anything. Kenny Stills, Darius Geist, the dream is over. Deion Lewis, the Titans. I think that dream's done. And finally, Latavius Murray on the Saints. I thought he was going to play the Mark Ingram role. And I mean, if you're a Latavius Murray owner, you got to be pretty bummed every time you think he's going to have a good game, right? I think those would be my cuts this week. Who's your list? Run them down.
Kyle Rudolph and Kirk Cousins were on my list as well.
Yeah.
But basically, my list is more of a list of who people probably actually have on rosters, and not deep rosters either. You mentioned a Jaguars receiver just there, but I don't think he's owned in any league I'm in. Some people have him in best balls that I drafted over the summer, but I had Dede Westbrook. Now he's a guy that's rostered. I have him. But I haven't played him yet. I haven't needed to. I've dropped him already in one or two places to pick up other people. But Dede Westbrook, show me something there. Especially with Minshew as quarterback, if we really trust him the way we talked about earlier. We mentioned Kyle Rudolph. I also mentioned earlier in the podcast, Jared Cook has to show me something there as well. And Robbie Anderson, who's another player that was popularly rostered in a lot of leagues, but hasn't shown squatta. And two quarterbacks. One is Josh Allen. If you're still rostering Josh Allen and trying to figure out what to do with him, he's got to show me something, or else he's gone. There are other options, and we talked about some of them. And here's one that hasn't shown me, I guess, as much as he's already shown you, and that's Kyler Murray. A lot of people drafted him pretty high. Don't know why, but they did. And he hasn't shown me much.
Yeah, he was a darling this summer.
No, and his counterpart from last year on the Cleveland Browns, Baker Mayfield, got to show me something. I mean, the draft stock,
he did for Baltimore was like his best game.
The draft stock that people had in him, I mentioned to you, I don't remember if it was offline or on this podcast, that I have Tom Brady in 5 leagues, but in none of those leagues did I get him earlier than the 9th round. And people were drafting Kyler Murray, and they were drafting Baker Mayfield in rounds way earlier than that.
Yeah, so I think for Murray, he's hovered around that 20-point range, and the whole offseason, I mean, all we heard was this Cliff Kingsbury air raid offense. The Cardinals are going to be passing like crazy, throwing the ball, and I think that just elevated his ADP out the roof.
Yeah,
So-
the hype, and he was the first pick of the draft, but in my opinion, that doesn't always mean everything. I mean,
Right.
not everybody
Yeah.
is Peyton Manning. Even Eli Manning, despite his 2 Super Bowls, was never really Peyton Manning
Very true.
for fantasy purposes. So Kyler Murray, for those people that pick Kyler Murray in the 4th or 5th round, or Baker Mayfield in the 4th or 5th round, ahead of the Phillip Rivers and the Tom Brady's and the Matt Ryans of the world, or you're probably sweating it out right now.
Yeah, Baker with the one big game against the Ravens, but up to that point, he hasn't really done much. It's been...
Yeah, all right, this press conference is over. Go ahead. No, it's over, pal. It's over.
That wraps up today's episode. For even more fantasy football content, find Frank on Twitter at FantasyWireHQ and online at thefantasyfootballwire.com. Be sure to tune in next week, and thanks for listening.